That is true. Yeah.
Being able to act through others at a distance than the people at the bottom who are often more perceptive
Yeah.
about their own impressions.
Yeah.
Rely less on reputation because people don't talk to them as much as
Yeah.
they form their own opinion.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. 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 Suki was going to say something. Wait, take the microphone. Yeah. 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 I mean, this is the way it works in a stratified society. This is also what Richard was pointing out, that the people who are sort of exposed to the buzz of events will be people on the ground level, and they report it up the chain of command till it comes up to the people at the top. Okay, let's go on because I want to cover what is really the heart of the sutta, which is Ratthapala's discourse to the king. Okay, so when the king hears this, then he has the chariots prepared, he drives to the park in order to pay homage to Ratthapala, and probably with the hope of asking him some questions and getting a discourse from him. And it's interesting, when the king approaches Ratthapala, he presents him with what's called an elephant rug. Perhaps it's a rug made originally from elephant skin. And he asks Ratthapala to sit down on it, but Ratthapala refuses and says, he just invites the king to sit down, and he says, I don't need the elephant seat, I'm sitting on my own mat. This would be a sitting cloth that monks used to, well, they still carry around. When they were traveling, they have this cloth that they would spread out because if they're sitting on the ground, they don't want to get the robe soiled with the mud and dirt of the ground, the moisture from the dew, so they put the sitting cloth out. Okay, now on page 685 we come to what we call the heart of the discourse. And here the king says to Ratthapala, he says there are 4 kinds of loss that people undergo, 4 kinds of disappointment that make them miserable. And it's because of this that some people shave off their hair and beard, put on the ochre robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. What are these 4? There's loss through aging, loss through sickness, the loss of wealth, and the loss of relatives. Then the king is going to explain each of these. The loss through aging means when somebody grows old, they consider, now I've become an old person, I'm in the last stage of life, no point striving to acquire more wealth, so let me shave off my hair and my beard and go forth and become an ascetic. This had become actually one of the practices that was absorbed into the Hindu system called the 4 ashramas, the 4 stages of life. When you're a young man, you go off, you observe brahmacharya or celibacy, you go find a teacher, and you study under the teacher. The Brahmins would learn the Vedas, young men in professions would study under a teacher to learn their profession. So maybe this would be from the age of 12 to 24. Then when you become supposedly 24, then you enter the next stage, the stage of the householder, where you marry, you beget a family, you bring up the family, till the children are grown up and can become independent. Then you enter on the 3rd stage, which is called vanaprastha, which means setting out for the forest. So you set out they say for the forest, which still means that you can live at home, but you simplify your home, you take up the observance of celibacy, even though your wife can be living at home, and you undertake religious practices, religious study, practice of meditation. And then comes the last stage when you reach old age. Let's see, say about 60 or so. I'm over 60. Am I in old age? The last stage is called the stage of sannyasa. It's the stage of complete renunciation, where you give up any kind of fixed abode, and you're supposed to just take the begging bowl and wander around all year round, except for the 3 months of the rainy season. Okay, so this seems to be referring to that, these old men who renounce in old age. Okay, but Ratthapala, he says, you have left home when you were just a young man in the prime of youth, endowed with all of the blessings of youth. So then he asks the question, what have you known or seen that you have gone forth into homelessness? Okay, then the second question, or second point, is loss through sickness. So somebody is afflicted, becomes ill, and through their illness they become disillusioned with the worldly life. And so then they think no more point in acquiring wealth. When you get sick, you cannot use your wealth for anything. So then they give up, probably when they recover their health, then they give up the household life and to go into homelessness. But he points out that Ratthapala all along has been healthy, strong, free from all illness and affliction. I don't know how the king knows about Ratthapala's digestive system. But this is a fixed formula that always comes in the text to indicate somebody is in good health. So it's just probably just filling in here this formula on the digestive system.
More than 50% of deaths in India still are intestinal disease.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah.
Water is of that, sanitation.
Yeah. Okay, then the third is the loss of wealth. Somebody has great wealth, many possessions, then suddenly, it says gradually their wealth dwindles away. Or nowadays with stock market, and it could be like we had in the Great Depression, all of their wealth disappears overnight. So then they think that, now I've lost all my wealth. It's very difficult to build up my wealth again, so I might as well go forth and become a monk. Then I have all of my material needs taken care of. I get a nice cottage. I get my food for the day. If I get sick, there'll be people solicitous for my well-being who will provide me with medical treatment. And so he goes forth because of loss of wealth. And then the fourth reason is, but Ratthapala's family has always been wealthy, so this doesn't apply to him. Okay, so then comes the fourth reason why some go forth, and that is that somebody has many friends, companions, relatives, and so on, and gradually those relatives pass away or move elsewhere, and so he finds himself almost all alone in the world. You might have wife, husband, children, many friends, and then as you get older, of course, the children grow up, one moves to California, another moves to Texas, another moves to Montana or Washington, Utah. Maybe wife passes away, or husband dies, or family, relationship turns sour. And then as you get older, Joe passed away, Jane passed away last week, till you find, all of the friends are gone. Like it strikes me with my father, like, he's 96 now, and like all of his old friends, none of them are alive anymore. And now I'm grown up, my sister's grown up. Of course, we're living not so far, but his brother has passed away, his sisters have passed away, his wife, my mother, has passed away. So there's really nobody there. But he doesn't think of going forth. Okay, so when you find yourself all alone in the world, then you think, okay, let me go forth into homelessness. But Ratthapala had many friends and companions, relatives, and so on, right here in this town. So he didn't suffer loss of relatives. So why have you gone forth? What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you known on the basis of which that you've gone forth into homelessness? Now what comes following this will give us the clue as to why, when Ratthapala was just a young man sitting in the audience when he first met the Buddha and heard the Buddha gives that discourse to the community, suddenly the idea came into his mind, let me go forth and become a monk. And then Ratthapala was insistent that so far as I understand the teaching of the Buddha, it's not possible for one who lives at home to truly live the perfectly pure spiritual life from making an end of suffering. So now Ratthapala is going to explain his understanding of the Dharma. And so he says that there are 4 ways of summing up the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One who knows and sees. And so when I knew these and saw them in the sense of deeply understood them, then, actually I would put the sequence, when I heard them, knew them, and saw their truth for myself, then I went forth from the home life into homelessness. So what are these 4 summaries of the Dhamma, or 4 principles? First, it said that this world is unstable. It's swept away. So that is the first summary. The second is that the world has no shelter and no protector. The third, that in this world there is nothing that one can truly call one's own, that one has to leave behind everything and pass on. That's the third summary. And then the fourth is that the world is incomplete, insatiable, the slave of craving. So when I heard and knew and deeply saw into the truth of that fourth principle, then I went forth from the home life into homelessness. So now the king asks Ratthapala about each of these principles or summaries of the Dhamma. So we come paragraph or section 38. The king says that, Ratthapala, you have said that the world is unstable, it is swept away. How should the meaning of this statement be understood? And now Ratthapala is going to come very much down to earth, so to speak, and speak to the king very directly in terms of his own experience. What can a king experience in his own life that's going to bring the truth of the Dhamma home to his own heart? He's not going to be speaking abstract teachings like these are the 5 aggregates, these are the 12 links of dependent origination, this is how the sense faculties interact with sense objects to give rise to consciousness, to give rise to contact, feeling, and so on. But he's going to speak in very concrete terms that the king can just reflect back on his own living experience and see that these principles can be confirmed from his own experience. Apparently this king is somewhat older. In fact, you will see that he's actually probably quite old. So Ratthapala says, "What do you think, O king? When you were 20 or 25 years old, weren't you an expert rider of elephants, of horses? You were an expert charioteer, expert in archery, in swordsmanship. You had strong thighs, strong arms, and you were capable in battle." So this king would have been trained as a prince in all of the military arts so that he would be able to be a strong and courageous and capable leader of his state. So the king says, "Yes, in fact, I was so strong and so powerful that sometimes I wondered if I had supernormal power then. At that time, I didn't see anybody who could equal me in strength." So then Ratthapala asked the king, "Are you now as strong in thighs and arms, as sturdy and capable as before?" And then the king confesses, "No, Ratthapala, now I'm," and again this is a stock passage on old age, "I'm old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage. My years have turned 80. So he's 80 years old. "Sometimes," and this is really very concrete and picturesque, "sometimes I mean to put my foot here and my foot winds up someplace else." You know, if you've ever seen sometimes an old person walking, they get up and lift the foot, and involuntarily it slips off to the side. They lift up the other foot, intending to put it there, and it goes off to the side. It's true, it happens. Okay, so this is the meaning of, Ratthapala says, this is the meaning of that summary of the Dhamma, that the world is unstable, it is swept away. Excuse me. I think this line comes from, or at least it's alluding to a verse that occurs in the Samyutta Nikaya very early in the Devata Samyutta, one of the first verses, that the world is unstable, it is swept away, it's being swept towards old age and death. Seeing this something like seeing this danger in life of the world, one should do deeds of merit that bring happiness. That is a verse the Deva speaks to the Buddha. And then the Buddha sort of corrects the Deva. The Deva was speaking correctly on, you call the mundane level. That's the level of doing meritorious deeds. But then the Buddha corrects the Deva and says, life is unstable, it is swept away, one is being driven towards old age and death. Seeing this danger in life in the world, the seeker of peace should not grasp the world's bait. So the Buddha here, he's pointing towards not doing deeds of merit, but not becoming attached to the worldly enjoyments. Because even the seeker of merit, or the one who does merit, seeking happiness, is still seeking some kind of mundane or worldly happiness. But the one who wants liberation realizes that even the mundane happiness that will come in the heavenly world through merits, even that is unstable and swept away. Okay, so when Ratthapala speaks this, then the king says, wonderful, wonderful, marvelous, how well that has been expressed by the Buddha, the Blessed One. And then he moves on to the next summary of the Dhamma. He says, and each time the king now, he's trying to present sort of a counterexample to, in a way that's disproving Ratthapala's statement, but then Ratthapala is going to come back with a counterexample, which shows that the Buddha's summary of Dhamma is actually true, and the king's assumption is invalid. So the king says, Master Ratthapala, there exist in this court, these are, I think, the four parts of the Indian army: elephant troops, cavalry, chariot troops, and infantry. And they can conquer any threats to us. But you say that in the world there is no shelter and no protector. So aren't you wrong about that? Because we have protectors, we have these branches of the army to protect us. So now Ratthapala is going to give his own counterexample. He says, what do you think, O king? Do you have any kind of chronic illness? And the king says, oh, I do have a chronic illness, Ratthapala. I have this chronic headache condition. And so whenever I'm to give a class on Saturday, the students have to call in to inquire whether the class will take place. No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong text. But the king says, I have a chronic wind ailment, Master Ratthapala. So maybe it's something like asthma? Because sometimes when he gets that ailment, then all of his friends and relatives gather around him, thinking that now the king is about to die, now the king is about to die. But probably they call a doctor who gives him some emergency treatment, and then he recovers. Okay, now the Buddha says, what do you, not the Buddha, Ratthapala says, what do you think, O king? Can you command your friends and relatives? Come, O my friends, all of you present, share this painful feeling of mine so that I feel less pain. Or do you have to feel that pain all by yourself alone? And so then the king says, I can't ask my friends and relatives to take my pain on themselves, but I have to feel it all alone. Like whenever I get my bad headache, even I have many friends for now it's been 25, 30 years, they say, oh, Bhante, we so wish that we could take your pain upon ourselves, but not possible. Everybody has to undergo their own pain. So if you get any real serious illness, cancer, stroke, heart disease, of course doctors can do something to ameliorate the condition, but nobody can take the pain. We each have to feel our own pain. And so this is one way in which it can be said that this world has no shelter and no protector. We can do things to protect ourselves, eat healthy food, don't eat junk food, take vitamins, get exercise every day, see a doctor, at least, have a doctor's appointment for a general checkup once a year. So those are, you could say, temporary protective measures. But when the time comes, when either external conditions or our karmic conditions all aggregate, come together, flow together, then we're going to come up with some illness. It might be this year, next year, in the distant future. Even if you get, the regular flu or bad cold. When I get a bad cold, I feel so miserable. And I think, oh, this is terrible, it's torture. But it always goes away after a week. But you get some real persistent chronic illness, and you realize that there's nothing that can be done to alleviate it. So you feel like you have no protector anymore. Of course, we always have as the ultimate protection the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the path. Okay, now we come to the third summary of the Dhamma. Okay, now the king is going to give the counterexample. So because Ratthapala has said that life, or that in the world there's nothing that we can call our own, but we have to leave all and pass on. And so the king points out that especially in this court, we have abundant gold coins and bullion, that's blocks of gold, stored away in our vaults and in our lofts. And probably the king said, and in your family, there's abundant gold and silver. So how could you say that we have nothing that's our own? Even though we might not have abundant gold and silver, but we have a nice home, a good bank account, maybe you own some stocks and other securities, you have a nice car, good furniture in your home. So do you think, this is mine, this all belongs to me? But how could you say that this isn't my own? So Ratthapala now gives his counter-argument. He says, what do you think, great king? Now you enjoy yourself with the 5 objects of sensual pleasure. But will you be able to have this in the life to come? So that you can just think to yourself, let me in the future enjoy these same 5 chords or objects of sensual pleasure. Can you get your home back, your car back, your furniture, everything you cherish, can you get it back? Or will others take over this property, which you will have to pass on, and you will have to pass on in accordance with your karma, your actions? Then the king admits, I cannot, even though I'm a powerful king, but I can't just lay down the rule, the law. This is my royal command. When I die, you hold all of this property for me in the next life, and I'll come back and take over this property. Maybe the Tibetan lamas can do that. Because then, they go looking, they keep the mala and the Dharma throne and even the room. When the old Rinpoche passes away, then they go seeking the boy. A few years later, they go seeking a boy who will recognize the mala, who shows some kind of memory of his previous life. Then they bring him back to the old monastery where he was the abbot, and they present him back to his room, and everything comes back to him. But for us ordinary people, that's not possible. And this is one of the themes, useful themes, in the meditation on death. And so the way some of the commentators explained it, and I found this useful to practice myself, is to think of the 3 things, to take this theme that there's nothing that's our own, we have to pass on and leave everything behind. I think of it in terms of 3 aspects. First thing that we have to give up when we pass away are all of our material possessions, including actually not only material things, but even intangible possessions like name and fame, reputation, status, position. All of this has to be given up when we die. So somebody can be the CEO of General Electric, General Motors, like Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple Computers, just in his 50s, passes on, and who does Apple Computers belong to now? Steve Jobs, just a corpse, no more position as the CEO of Apple Computers. So we have to give up all of these, we call these material acquisitions. Second thing we have to give up are all our friends and relatives. So the mother has to give up her children, father has to give up his children. Sometimes, if the child is to die first, the child has to give up mother and father, brothers and sisters, all of our friends, our colleagues, our teachers, our students. Everyone has to separate. And what is the third thing that we have to give up when we die? Exactly. Our bodies. So now we say that this body is mine. Now I'm beautiful, now I'm handsome, now I'm strong and healthy. Even if I'm weak and ugly and sickly, but still, even the man who has lying on the bed with maybe a terminal cancer in a lot of pain, still clings to the body as mine. But if one meditates in this way a little bit every day, I have to give up all material acquisitions, have to give up all my dear relatives and friends, have to give up even this body, then one becomes sort of detached from these things, which doesn't mean that one becomes cold and indifferent. One could still enjoy one's possessions, enjoy one's friends, and still take care of one's body. But when the time comes to pass away, one could just let the body go, let everything go peacefully. Okay, then the last one, we come to the fourth one, the one this is quite interesting one. Here the king doesn't give a counterexample, but he simply says, Master Ratthapala has said that the world is incomplete, insatiable, the slave of craving. How should the meaning of this statement be understood? And now Ratthapala, again, he's going to use the king's own experience. He says, what do you think, great king? Do you reign over the Kuru country? That's the northern part of India. The king said, excuse me. The king says, of course I do, that's my kingdom. Then Ratthapala says, suppose a trustworthy man, a messenger, came from the east and said to you, you should know, great king, I've come from the east, and there I saw a large country, powerful, rich, crowded with people. There's plenty of elephants there, plenty of cavalry and so on, plenty of ivory, gold, bullion, plenty of women for wives. But your army is strong enough to conquer it. If you want, just go ahead, and it's yours. So what are you going to do? So the king will say, I'm satisfied with one realm, that's enough for me. Why do I need the eastern country? You know, nowadays it's like saying, well, actually, this is what's going on. You know, the ice of the Arctic is melting. You know, it's reached the greatest extent of ice melting in all of history. We should be in a panic. The world is changing. But what are the CEOs of the oil companies and the gas companies thinking? We have to change our, sources of energy. We can't let this go on. No, they're thinking, wow, new opportunity has opened up. We can now go drilling in the Arctic and get new sources of oil, new sources of natural gas. So this is the way the world is insatiable, a slave to craving. So the king is going to think, when he hears this, when he's asked this question, what would you do? He says, we would conquer it and rule over it, Ratthapala. You think I'm a fool? Of course I'll conquer it. Okay, then the same thing happens, the west, north, east. We did the east with the west, north, south, even from across the sea. They say there's this realm there, you could conquer it. What are you going to do? I'll conquer it. Take possession of it. He might, in the battle, he might lose, 10,000 men. Innocent men might be killed on his side. Maybe 20,000 on the enemy side. 30,000 people dead. What does it matter? For the king, there's wealth there. There's ivory, gold, women for wives. So he's never satisfied. Okay, so each time the Ratthapala gives his explanation, the king rejoices, and then Ratthapala sums up and says that this, when I heard this and knew it and saw it for myself, then I went forth from the home life into homelessness. Okay, and then after Ratthapala gave this explanation, then he spoke these verses. Basically, the verses are pretty much just stating in verse form the principles that he's already explained. So I won't go through the verses here, but you can read the verses on your own. But just now I'll ask if there's any questions about this or any comments. Okay, then we'll stop for the morning, and then we'll break for the lunch now, and then we can come back, say about 12:10. We could have a discussion period. And I should say that next week we'll be having the class in the library, because they're going to be doing the 7-day ceremony here. It's the Yang Wang Bao Chan, the Emperor Wang's jewel repentance ceremony. If anybody wants to participate in that, it will be going on all week, starting tonight. Okay, so we'll come back at about 12:10. And here I've brought some books from my friend Venerable Analeo. Remember, he was here in June, some of you. These are the Baos had printed 2 books of short essays by Venerable Analeo that had been published separately, called Excursions into the Thought World of the Pali Discourses. So now both of these booklets have been combined into one, and some of them have been sent to me for free distribution. So I'm going to put them maybe on the front table here, this table, and anybody who wants can take a copy. And they are very good, very short, but very, very scholarly essays on different themes that occur in the Nikayas. Okay, so let us end with the sharing the merits, verses to share the merits. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Uditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Etavatacham Hehi Padang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Devanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhutanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Satanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Pavag Upadaya Avici Hetato Etantare Satakai Upapana Rupiya Rupicha Sanya Sanino Dukkha Pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. Then next week we do the Angulimala Sutta. That's another sutta that uses a narrative framework in order to convey its message. So again, we'll be exploring that sutta for the sort of underlying message that's coming through the narration. Okay, we could stand for paying homage to the Buddha.